Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.
Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now.
Hello, everybody. This is Mike Hare, and welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with my co-host Matt Hoffman. You can find us on Facebook at All Metal Mode as well as All Metal Mode Podcast UK. All Metal Mode is every Monday and Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and All Metal Mode UK is every Thursday at 8 p.m. GMT time or 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Free online magazine, dirtdigestmagazine.com. Current issue features my Monday night co-host, Gypsy Jules. She's the featured treasure hunter. And I have a review of the Nocta Macro Amphibio metal detector in this current issue. Next month, Mr. Darrell Miklos will be the featured treasure hunter. Saying that, I have to give a big thank you to Mike Fusion. I think I said that right, maybe. Thank you so much, Mike, for helping us get Darryl on the show. We appreciate it. If you enjoy the show, please hit the like button and tell a few friends about us. A lot of ways to find us. You can listen to us live on Spreaker, or you can download from Spreaker. We're on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube under All Metal Mode. We have a live chat going on right now. We do every show. If you'd like to join in and ask questions, if you got questions for Darryl, it just depends on what platform you're on. But when you hit the show, a little rectangle should have came up with like the pause button and stuff. Look for the chat bubble. Join us in chat, and you can ask questions. Now, we are going to hold questions until the end. It's really hard to follow along and answer questions. And as we go along, it's a lot easier to just wait until the end. So if you have questions, just please hold on to them, and we'll let you know when it's time to start asking questions. I apologize for my voice. I've been sick. About lost it at the end of last night's show. It was pretty rough, but Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Everything seems to be cutting in and out. I feel like my internet connection's about to go down or something here. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but overall pretty good. Been out detecting here and there, finding a bunch of interesting things, lots of large scents and some interesting tokens and some silver here and there. But yeah, I'm doing all right.
Well, good. You as excited as I am about this show?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm a little bummed that I don't know what's going on with my connection here tonight. Something's not exactly right, but yeah, no, I believe it or not, as a kid, I've always fascinated and dreamed about stuff like underwater diving for treasures and shipwrecks and stuff like that. Unfortunately, though I still really enjoy that type of stuff, I can't go but maybe 5 foot under the water, 6 foot under the water. It hurts my ears so bad that it's physically impossible for me to dive.
Well, and you and I have rowboat and magnet money. We don't have.
Well, I couldn't even free dive with no equipment because I get about 6 feet under and it's like a death sentence. I feel like my ears are literally going to explode. So unfortunately, that ended that ever as a dream and hope of mine. So I stick to metal detecting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my I don't even have rowboat money. I got like inflatable raft money.
Right. Yeah, good times. I want to say just real quick before we bring Darryl on the show, for a couple hillbillies like us, it's a little intimidating to have somebody on that, has a successful TV show. And, we're detectorists. We're not treasure hunters. This guy's finding some killer stuff. But I got to say, really down-to-earth, nice guy. He's just been wonderful to talk to. We've had emails back and forth and conversations, and definitely not as nervous, because he's just such a down-to-earth, nice guy. Darryl, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great, guys. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, our pleasure. Absolutely. We are doing great. Except being sick and my voice, but I'm good. Doing good.
So that's all right. You guys can switch off between you and Matt.
Yeah, there you go. We'll just take over, Matt, as long as but between the two of us with his internet and my voice, hopefully we can get through the show. Hopefully. You there, Matt?
I am here. Yes, sir. I'm still here. Everything sounds fantastic right now, so I don't know what changed in the past minute or two, but everything sounds great on my end.
You sound great again. Absolutely. So, let's get right into it. I'm excited to do this. How'd you get into treasure hunting, Darryl?
Well, it was back in the late 60s. My father was ill, and he was a police officer in Reno, Nevada, and he fell ill, was recuperating from a wound from his undercover duties, and he was in the hospital. And my mom brought him a magazine to look through, and one of them was National Geographic's from 1965, featuring Kip Wagner and his find of one of the what they refer to as the cabin wreck. And it talked about Kip Wagner walking along the beach, finding stones on the sand and skipping them across the water. And he soon came to realize he wasn't skipping stones. He was skipping silver pieces of 8 right back into the sea. And my dad was fascinated by that. And we were living in Reno at the time, and then we moved back to Laguna Beach, where I'm from. And he decided to save up his money and head out to Florida. So in about 1969, 1970, we moved to Cocoa Beach, Florida. And he set out to walk the beaches with me and my 3 sisters to go find these stones that were on the beach and kind of follow suit with what Kip did. He was actually having a little bit of success, and he paid me and my sisters each a quarter to find any black stones. And we gave him a bunch, got a few quarters for it, and he ran into Kip Wagner, and they began a relationship. And that's how I got started.
Wow, how cool is that? That is such a neat story. Tell us more about your dad. I'd like to hear more. And obviously you did right then, but did you do more treasure hunting with him? And when did he get into actually going out and looking for wrecks and stuff?
Well, it was about 1970. He and my uncle Ray formed a company called Nomad Treasure Seekers, and they bought a boat, and they bought it together, and they used to take it out. Once they started finding treasure coins on the beach with us kids, and more when he would go metal detecting, and he bonded and he formed a relationship with Kip Wagner. Kip Wagner kind of taught him the ropes about what to do and how to get started. And so he and my uncle would take a boat out every day and look for shipwrecks. They really had, neither one of them had any real experience, but Kip went on with them a couple times and kind of showed them the ropes. And I used to tag along up to the dock. My dad would never let me get on the boat, or he'd let me get on the boat while it was at the dock, but as soon as they set out to sea, he wouldn't let me on the boat. So one time I snuck on, and I hid inside the galley in a cabinet below, and I started throwing up because I got really seasick, and my uncle came in, and I don't know what he was doing in the galley, but he was looking for something. He heard me in the cabinet, and he opened it up and said, "Darryl, what the heck are you doing here? Your dad is going to freaking kill you." And I went, "I know, please, I just wanted to go with you. You keep telling me one day he's going to let me go, and you guys never let me go." And my dad came down and said, "Darryl, what the heck are you doing?" He used other words. "What the heck are you doing in here?" And I said, "Dad, I just wanted to go with you." And he picks me up by my pants and my shirt, and he threw me overboard and said, "So you want to be a treasure hunter? Well, if you can swim back to the boat, I will let you come with me today and today only." And that's how my introduction to treasure hunting. And I did make it back to the boat. I was a really good swimmer. And my uncle tried to convince him to let me go more often, which I was okay if I was metal detecting on the beach or looking for coins on the beach. But he just didn't want me out at sea for whatever reason. But later on, as years came, as he got further into this, he was running into hard times as far as finding shipwrecks. He formed a relationship with Kip Wagner. Kip Wagner introduced him to astronaut Gordon Cooper, and Gordon Cooper said, "Well, look, if you guys are trying to raise money to keep your treasure hunting alive, if you guys go off the Cape here, there's a bunch of spent booster rockets. If you guys happen to be out there and you find a bunch of spent booster rockets, give us the coordinates. We'll tell NASA to retrieve them, and they'll pay you for each one that you find." And as he was retrieving one, or as he noticed that there was a booster rocket there, he also found a shipwreck. That was his first shipwreck. And then he was hooked for life.
Wow.
And I worked several wrecks with my dad in the late 70s and early 80s. When I got a little bit older, he finally had the confidence in me to put me in the water, because he noticed I was an avid surfer. I used to surf before school, after school, and sometimes during school. And so I was born to be in the water, and he noticed that, and he said, "Okay, I'll let you come diving with me." And we started several expeditions with him in the late 70s all the way to the early 80s. And that's how it all began for me.
Now, he's known for a couple big finds, correct?
Yeah, he's worked with a lot of people. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, it's a totally different world. Whatever you found, you got to keep. The rules were totally different. It was kind of like the Wild West. I don't really remember the business end of it and how it was that he gave the shares that were due the state of Florida. But I do remember going out with him in the Florida Keys. We dove the 1715 plate fleet, which is what they refer to the Treasure Coast today, which still today there are groups of treasure hunters out there with subcontractor leases looking for that treasure still, because there's still about several $100 million worth of treasure that has yet to be found. Mm-hmm. And we started out there. My dad was partners with Mel Fisher for a long time during the early years. And that's what enabled me to go dive the 1715 fleet with him. And then we worked several wrecks in Marathon from the 1733 fleet. And I got my training out there. And later on, in 1980, I was actually, my dad had broke apart his relationship with Mel Fisher and set out to get his own lease in the Marquesas Keys. And we were looking for the Atocha near the quicksands in the Marquesas Keys. And that was where I got most of my training, was those three particular wreck sites. So, and then that's how it all started.
Yeah, that's incredible. Absolutely.
So at what point? So okay, so obviously Kip Wagner, your dad met with him and became friends with him and whatnot, and obviously guided and gave a lot of insight to some of the treasure hunting and shipwreck hunting. And at what point did he introduce your dad to into Mr. Cooper?
Well, I don't think that they really formally got real acquainted up until 1978 when my dad was invited to do a show. See, my dad, what he did is he found out that it was, contrary to popular belief, my dad was not a diver. He hated the water. He was very uncomfortable in the water, and that's why he brought me into this, because he knew I was really good in the water, and his partner, my Uncle Ray, was really good in the water. So he found it more attractive to him to be a part of financing and selling treasure coins. So he used to buy a bunch of the 1715 fleet treasure and bring it back to the West Coast. And he became really, really good at selling treasure. And he introduced it to the West Coast because a lot of people on the West Coast, nobody had any idea. People were familiar with it in Florida, but very unfamiliar with it on the West Coast. My dad had a way of talking and meeting people that was pretty incredible when he was younger. He managed to get himself a bit of notoriety, having worked with Mel Fisher and Kip Wagner, and he got himself on the Johnny Carson show, and he went to Merv Griffin, and on Merv Griffin shows where he met astronaut Gordon Cooper, and I was backstage with my family, and I was enamored with him because he was an astronaut, and I just thought he was like a superhero. And that's their real first strong meeting, and they were friends ever since that show.
That's pretty cool.
And then Gordon Cooper was a very successful treasure hunter. He was very close with the Real 8 Corporation that was originally set up by Kip Wagner. And that group of treasure hunters were very successful off the Treasure Coast and other parts of Florida in finding shipwreck and tons of treasure. And my dad made sure he hung out with all the right people, got well connected with the treasure hunters, and just found that he could make more money selling the treasure in California. So that's what he did. And then we started some of his own expeditions, and I would accompany him whenever I could. And Gordon was an avid treasure hunter. He had worked very closely with the Real 8 Corporation way before he met my father. And he and Kip Wagner and Ulian and Dan Thompson, these guys would all get together and locate shipwreck sites just off the Cape even. Right off Cape Canaveral, there were several shipwrecks that were out there, and they were very successful in finding treasure. Back then, I met with Dan Thompson, one of the founders of the Real 8 Corporation. I met his mother, who's still alive, while filming Cooper's Treasure the first season. And she used to tell me the way they used to divide the coins with the state was they carry bucket loads of coins, gold and silver, dump it on the hood of a car, stick their arm into the pile, and push what looked like 20% and say, "Okay, that's your share, and this is ours." They didn't even look at each coin. It was a totally different. Like I said, it was the Wild West, and it was a totally different type of treasure hunting. And back in those days, that's something I wish I could have experienced. I would have loved to have been back there in the early '60s and been part of that inception of the treasure hunting crowd.
Absolutely. Real quick, I want to announce one more time in case you missed it in the beginning. If you come in a little bit later. If you're listening live and you'd like to join in the live chat, whatever, it depends on what platform you're on, but somewhere you should see a chat bubble. When you start the show, a rectangle should come up with pause and play button and all that, and you should see a chat bubble. And if you have questions, just save them to the end. We'll open it up for questions towards the end. And so, yeah, if you'd like to come in and ask questions, please join us in the live chat. Sorry, guys, I lost my place. What was next?
Well, I could just continue on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So after my father and I were working with a group of people in the Marquesas Keys looking for the Atocha, at that time my dad, like I said, had broken up his relationship with Mel Fisher, and they were kind of at odds at that time, which I was really uncomfortable with as a kid because I really liked Mel Fisher, and then their relationship went south, and I was really uncomfortable with it, but I loved treasure hunting, so I agreed, obviously, to go with my father instead of, continue to take sides with Mel Fisher. And they were competitors, and it got pretty nasty between them, and then they went to court, and my father lost in court a battle against the rights to salvage out there near Mel Fisher's area. So my father decided that he would go to the Turks and Caicos because he got acquainted with two treasure hunters, John Gasquet and Olin Frick, who were looking for what they believed was Christopher Columbus's ship, the Pinta. And he ended up working with them, bringing money to them to help them fund their project. Olin Frick passed away because of a tragic accident. And then my dad took over his lease, and he set up the entire expedition to look for what at the time back then he thought was the Pinta, which later I came to find out was probably a early Pinzon wreck, probably early 1500s, 1504 to 1510. And there was a few complications with the government and the issues that came up back then. And we had to exit the country because of my dad's relationship with the government there. It kind of went south. And again, these situations, I'm just capsulizing this in real short term, but there was a lot of really scary moments in treasure hunting because my dad his personality was so abrasive and in your face, and he was such an eccentric person that you either really loved him or you really hated him, and you didn't want to be around him when he was around the people that hated him because it was potentially really dangerous to your life. And there was a couple of times in my life where I felt like, this could be it. And I soon became to realize that my father had I don't know if he was bipolar or whatever it was, but he really had something working against him, and he was angry at the world at times. And he was the most interesting person I ever met, but at the same token, he was also very irritable and irritating. And so he was very difficult to work with, and I always tried to please him as a young man, and I just never seemed to fulfill that. Eventually, he ended up divorcing my mom, and he disappeared for about a decade or more, and then popped back in my life in 1997, contacted me, probably through my uncle, and found out my phone number, called me and said, Darryl, I know I've put you through a lot of crap, but I've got something that might interest you. If you remember astronaut Gordon Cooper, could you do me a favor? Here's his phone number. Give him a call. I bought a plane ticket for you and him to come to Nassau, Bahamas. I'm trying to ramp up another expedition. Would you go meet with him and fly with him to Nassau, Bahamas? Had it been anybody else, I would have said no. But because it was astronaut Gordon Cooper, I jumped at the chance. And that's how that started for me. That's when I really started to have build my relationship with Gordon. It started back in 1997 when we went to Nassau, Bahamas.
Wow, that is so cool. So, what was that expedition? What was he on to, and how did that go?
Well, one of the things that took place prior to our arrival was there was a treasure hunter. I don't want to name his name, but there was a problem. One of the treasure hunters who actually attained a lease in the Bahamas ended up taking off with the treasure that he had found, according to the Bahamas. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just going by what I've heard. And he didn't give the share that the Bahamas were entitled to, so they put a moratorium in place. Even though we brought astronaut Gordon Cooper with his background in treasure and his background as an astronaut, we tried to get them interested in letting us have a lease out there, and they just wouldn't allow it. So, and we were going to look for the shipwreck that was exhibited in our season 2 of Cooper's Treasure, and we never got a chance to do it. But during those 3 weeks of trying to schmooze with the right people in politics and convince them that we're different than the other guy who caused the problem. I know the guy's name, but I don't want to say it. But
Right.
we promised them that we would be different. We would set up museums. We would go about this in a totally professional manner with a methodology that was, scientific. And we weren't just out there as treasure hunters to rape and pillage your country of your rich cultural heritage. We actually wanted to share. We had a good idea after the fact, and they just wouldn't allow it. But during those 3 weeks, I was able to get really close to astronaut Gordon Cooper, and he and I bonded. And I actually realized just in those couple weeks that I was closer to him than I had been to my father all my entire life, and we just hit it off after after we weren't able to get a lease. I wanted to start another business, and because Gordon and I had multiple conversations, he used to race boats, and I said, well, look, I've got an idea for a boat company. I'm looking for an office. And he goes, well, look, I have an office in Van Nuys. There's a space available there for you. If you want, you can rent that office next to mine. We'll share offices, and I'll charge you $300 a month. And I went, you got to be kidding me. And that's how it started. We built a relationship for 7 years until he passed, and hence the story Cooper's Treasure was born.
Tell us more about him, and on the show, it's goodness, I hope I'm not saying this wrong. I think, I don't know if you said it, but it definitely felt like you had a better relationship with him than your own father. I hope that's okay to say. I mean, that's kind of how I portrayed it. So what was he like? How did you end up with his notes and stuff and all that? I mean, he must have thought so highly of you.
Yeah, and you're right. And I'm not afraid to say it either. I was much closer to Gordon than I was with my own father. Wow, he wasn't in my face. He wasn't belligerent. He wasn't critical. He would actually take his time and listen to what I had, my ideas and my thoughts. When I came back to California, I set up a boat company called Swift Oceanics. We were the first people to bring personal watercraft and make them out of aluminum and rather than fiberglass. And these things went 95 miles an hour. Granted, this is 1997. Wow. A 95-mile-an-hour wet bike, or what is similar to a jet ski, back in those days was unheard of. And we were the first people to put a 4-stroke motor into one of these. And Gordon, having been a racer, he was into car racing, boat racing, airplanes, treasure, space. There wasn't a subject matter that was boring to talk about Gordon. So every day I was in the office, I was just picking his brain. He was basically retired. He just wanted to share the office. And because I was so excited about his entire life, he started to come to the office more often, and we hung out every day. We would go to places. I'd say, hey, how about I set up a meeting? We go and talk to these people. And I would set up a meeting. We would go visit the set of Star Trek Voyager, go out there and meet those people. And everybody wanted to be with astronaut Gordon Cooper. And then I started getting more involved in talking about treasure with him. And I didn't realize up until I had spent several months with him just how involved in treasure hunting he was prior to even setting foot in space. He and Kip Wagner and the Real 8 Corp guys, they were so involved in treasure hunting. These guys were the grandfathers. These guys were the people they weren't the first, but they were the group that really formed what today is treasure hunting and the business behind it. And he was like an encyclopedia. He was down to earth. He was humble. He was kind. He was just an all-around good person. He was interested in what I had to say and my thoughts and ideas, and that's what made us so close. Whereas my dad was into whatever he was doing, and if being around me was convenient for him or added to his story and bettered what it was that he was trying to do, I was invited. But, you know, if I wasn't needed, I wasn't there. On the other hand, Gordon was enjoying my company, and he helped me with my boat company. We talked about aerospace engineering. I helped him with an airplane project that he was doing. Then we started talking treasure. We set up an expedition in Mexico. We set up a whole expedition with the Mexican government in Mexico in 1999. We went out and found several shipwrecks, scores of shipwrecks in the Gulf of Mexico together. And we formed this bond that was pretty incredible. But throughout the relationship and the years spent at the office, I realized that his health was ailing him. And I could see that his Parkinson's was getting gradually worse, and it was building up faster. I could see the change between 1997 until 2000, 2001. And it was in 2001 he sat me down and told me that, you know, he really enjoyed my company, and then he started telling me about all the secret files that he had done and projects that he had worked on in detail. He'd already told me about them, but he showed me the files and said, I want to make sure that I give you this. And he gave me a bunch of space memorabilia that he had collected that was just collecting dust in the office, and said, take these things, hold on to them. If anything ever happens to me, make sure you finish what I started and what you and I were doing together there in Mexico and the Bahamas. And I went, absolutely, I would absolutely do that for you. And I think he knew that the end was coming for him. And it was in 2004 that he passed away.
Wow.
And it was one of the most horrifying moments of my life. And to this day, I miss him I think about Gordon every single day.
Wow.
Every single day. It's just, it's hard for me to explain, but I really did have a bond with him, and we did everything together, and he made me laugh. I made him laugh. And it was like we're like best buddies.
Yeah.
Just best buddies.
That's incredible.
That's the way it was.
That's incredible. You know, you telling me all this about halfway through as you were talking about this particular moment, it sounds like you have no choice but to be a treasure hunter. I mean, it just sounds like you keep like you just keep getting pulled back into it. I mean,
I do. From my father, from starting out at 6 years old, sneaking on a boat, all the way till today. I mean, every time I get fed up and I want to throw in the towel, I get sucked back in, because once you're in it, there's just nothing like it, even though there's so much money to lose in this business because it's so expensive. The public don't realize just how expensive it is. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but it is not easy to raise money for treasure hunts. And I saw my dad do it in a way that I didn't want to emulate because, you know, I don't know. It's you've got to raise the money. You've got to use it for the right purposes. My dad would use some of this for his own personal gain, and that's where we that's where we differed completely. And Gordon taught me how to raise money and how to pitch the idea. So what people don't realize is just how expensive it could go into hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to start an expedition. And, you know, it's high risk, high rewards. If you hit the big pile, you're likely to be able to pay off these investors and then some, and keep some for yourself and share the wealth with the host countries. But it's very risky. And the hardest part about treasure hunting is not raising the money, believe it or not. The hardest part is the permit process.
Wow.
To get a host country to believe that you're not there to steal their rich cultural heritage, and to convince them not to believe the academics, the universities, UNESCO, and all these other organizations, that you're not out there to steal and ruin the rich cultural history. There's so many shipwrecks in the Caribbean and Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. There are literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of shipwrecks that have yet to be discovered, that are sitting at the bottom of the ocean, rotting away, And unfortunately, the academic organizations and the other organizations don't want private venture companies, i.e. treasure hunters, to do this anymore. The business is being shut down every day, little by little. And so there's not a whole lot of life left in treasure hunting.
So what do they want? Do they want it to go just stay at the bottom?
They want it to be... They wanted to. UNESCO would love just to keep everything at the bottom. They call it in situ preservation, which makes no sense because you can't preserve anything while it's in situ at the bottom of the sea in those types of conditions and expect it to be preserved. It's not a burial site. They treat them like a burial site. We treat it like an airplane accident. You go down there, you take measurements, you take photographs, you document everything. And then once you've got all the information and you've collected all the data, you retrieve what's left over so that the traffic can continue.
Yeah.
But in their opinion, they would rather leave it in situ preservation, which to me makes no sense whatsoever. That does not tell a story. All these stories and shipwrecks and artifacts are going to be lost forever.
Yeah.
And if there was a way that the two sides can meet in the middle and work hand in hand, is what I'm trying to do now, is bridge that gap. But I'm telling you that the academic organization, the archaeologists, marine archaeologists, they're 100% dead set against working with treasure hunters, and it's very, very difficult to get them to see it the way we see it.
And it's ridiculous.
Yes,
ridiculous.
They'll tell you behind closed doors. They get it, they understand it, and you're right. But when you get out in public, they'll never say that. It's like David and Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
And Goliath just happens to be getting bigger every year.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a function of people ruining it over the years by doing, a lot of silly things and ridiculous things and really tarnishing, the true value of a legitimate treasure hunter and to preserve the stuff? I mean, you see this with a lot of cities and stuff all the time. You get a few bad detectorists out there, and next thing you know, hey, no one's allowed to detect in any of the parks in this city, this, that, and the other. It's all 100%. You don't touch it. Now, and that's not even historical value stuff. That's just because a few people ruin it for everybody else. I mean, did you think that's what drives the situation with some of these possibilities?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what started it. But look, as in anything, it doesn't matter if you sell cars for a living. There are guys that are cheating and saying that this car never got in an accident and it's been in multiple accidents and they fake the warranty and all of this stuff. It doesn't matter what business you're running. There's always crooks, and then there's the good guys. Now, if you got the proper finances, you've got a proper team, you've got a professional attitude, and you've got the methodology that fits the mainstream ideology of these academic organizations, why shouldn't you let us go out there and do this? Because otherwise, history is going to be lost forever. But unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to sway these people into seeing it our way because of a few bad apples. We really don't know the motive to get rid of treasure hunters. And unfortunately, that's just the way it's going. And so I'm doing whatever I can. And one of the ways that I thought would be interesting, and the only reason why I accepted doing a television show, because a lot of these my treasure hunting friends and one of the things is not treasure hunters are just not friendly to each other. That's one of the biggest problems. Secondly, they all tell me, and they're all against any treasure hunter going out there and doing TV. All my treasure hunting buddies said, "You're a fool. I would never do that. God dang, you're dumb. Don't do it." And then after you do a show and it's successful, the same person will come around and go, "Wow, that was pretty freaking awesome, man. Good job." So there's a lot of, but I thought that if I could showcase what it was like to treasure hunt and how difficult it is and the real life situations of being a treasure hunter and how you make an expedition successful, how hard it is, that people would have a greater appreciation. And not only that, we would get to showcase just how professional we are, the methodology behind what we do, the type of equipment, and showcase to the academics and UNESCO and these other organizations, that we're not all bad guys, that we really know what it is that we're doing. We're not just weekend warriors out there to go rip it out of the ocean and sell it in the black market. That's not what I'm about. That's the only reason why I agreed to do the TV show first, because I thought it was a perfect venue to show the people that don't want to listen to treasure hunters. They have no other choice but watch it and see it on TV. And I can guarantee you that secretly, the people that are against private venture companies doing this are probably saying, you know what, that was pretty damn good. Mm-hmm. And they won't admit it, but we're trying. I'm trying to bridge that gap to let people realize, these people that have the power to issue these permits, that, you know what, okay, we got to set a bunch of rules in place, but we can't make them so stringent that we're putting them out of business. Otherwise, it's useless. Let's work with each other. That's the big fight. So we're trying to bridge that gap. So I may be rambling on, but you got me going here.
No, you are doing awesome. Now, do you think it's going to improve? Do you think? I mean, I agree. From what I see watching your show, I think it's. I felt like it was pretty raw and just true. There was a pretty popular metal detecting show. And I like the guys who were on it and everything else, but they would find a coin and they're jumping around and jumping on a tree and breaking a limb and rolling down a hill and being silly. And it was just kind of ridiculous on that aspect. And I just feel like everything on your show is just kind of raw, that like, it's not, okay, do it again, but with enthusiasm, hey, do it again, jump off the boat and act a fool or anything. I felt like it was really raw in that aspect. I mean, and I think you do shed a good light and you show, you portray it in a very noble way. Do you think it'll help you? And then on the other hand, I know that question was long. On the other hand, how does your name affect this? I mean, is there good? Is there bad with your name?
Well, look, because I'm a Miklos, and my dad had a few incidences back in the 80s and with other groups and other expeditions that he had run. My name is Miklos tended to haunt me over the years because of his bad reputation, so to speak. And not that he really did anything bad. It's just that he was put in bad positions just because of his personality. He could have got himself out of those predicaments had he carried himself better. But the problem is I'm a Miklos too. So a lot of that followed me around. It was very difficult for me to go back to the Turks and Caicos, given that there was an incident that took place back in 1980, where I can tell you none of it's true as far as some of the things that were said about my father back in 1980 in the Turks and Caicos. But imagine me trying to follow up. My dad was scared to death to go back to Turks and Caicos. I had to go back out there in 2000, 2001, start an expedition, hoping that they weren't going to try and do the same thing to me that they did to my dad. Well, they did try. And unfortunately, it was very hard to overcome the Miklos stigma. And I think that because I brought astronaut Gordon Cooper in, it helped untarnish my reputation as being blood related. Because I'm blood related, I must be as bad as my father was said to be. And my father wasn't a bad guy. He just didn't carry himself well.
I gotcha.
So it was really hard. My job to try to prove myself as a treasure hunter that wasn't like his father, and Gordon helped me figure out how to do that. And because I'm pretty much just the opposite of my father. I'm pretty down to earth. I'm easygoing. I like to take the road of least resistance. And I really want to work through this. That's why even though I'm talking about the academics and UNESCO and these organizations that don't want to work with private venture companies or treasure hunters, I'm trying to figure out a way that I can make that gap smaller so that we can figure out how to work together, because all this treasure is sitting in these third world countries or these developing countries. And that treasure is sitting out there, and proof is in the artifacts that we bring up. You can see the degradation of the silver and artifacts as you bring them up, and what the saltwater environment does to these things. Mm-hmm. If you leave that down there, you're leaving a perfect economic solution to these developing countries to get themselves out of, maybe not total debt, but add to the government coffers by bringing in tourism and museums and showcasing the rich cultural history based on the Spanish explorers and the English and the Italians and the Americans and the Dutch that came into the New World, and talk about their rich past. The money can be used building roads and infrastructure and schools and whatever it is that the government wants to use the money for, and they can save part of that treasure that's found from us and put it in museums and showcases, because it becomes redundant to put 1,000 of the same type of coins in a museum. You only need 10. And right. A little bit of everything, and then they could sell off the rest or auction it off or whatever it is and raise money for their own specific needs. And if you're you're paying a little bit to a company like ourselves or treasure hunters, there's nothing wrong with that, because we're covering all the costs, and that's what we're trying to prove or put out there and let them know. That's not a bad business model. A bad business model is to leave it at the bottom of the ocean in situ and watch it rot. Well, right. The problem is you can't even watch it rot because they won't even let you down there to look at it. Yeah. It's just horrible.
Absolutely. So you went back in season 2. Is that you kind of ran into trouble and had to leave? I think that's where you were at, if I'm correct. I'm horrible.
That was in Turks and Caicos. Yeah, that was in Turks and Caicos. And then we went to the Bahamas. We continued in the Bahamas. The situation in Turks and Caicos, I love the Turks and Caicos people. I love the country. There was a little bit of a hiccup there because one of the people that was also an applicant for that wanted to look for a shipwreck out there believed that we were on his shipwreck site and called the Marine Patrol to come out and check us out, and said that we were lifting up an artifact or stealing from his. And then the police came out. They found out that we were lifting up an anchor, and we had thought we had permission. Well, we had permission. The TV company got permission. We got the green light to go ahead and lift up an anchor for the purposes of documentation and photography, nothing more, and to put it back in situ. Mm. Well, there was a complication between who actually gave us the permit and whatnot, and that caused a problem. And that's why we had to end the Turks and Caicos rather than follow it up in season 2. But in real life, we're fine. We're able to, we've established a good relationship with the Turks and Caicos government, and my company, Gemini Marine Exploration, is actually working on getting a project started there again. This will be project number 6, my 6th time at bat for that country. In the meantime, that's why we went ahead and got a permit to do the show in the Bahamas, because we didn't want to go back to the Turks and Caicos until we ironed out all the differences, and we did. We have. So it's not the government's fault there. It was just a total miscommunication.
Okay, so things are going good now, and then it looks like you'll be back.
Yeah, I'm almost sure that we'll be back in the Turks and Caicos. We have a lot of unfinished business there. I know where so many locations of shipwreck material there and shipwrecks that are both historically and commercially valuable. And historically speaking, I know where a lot of stuff is from that earliest colonial period and that fleet that belonged to Columbus. I know where most of the shipwrecks are that relate directly to the Pinzon brothers, who were part of Columbus's original fleet. There's a lot of stuff that I'm hoping that we can do. And if not, the worst case scenario is the government's completely shut it down because the academic organizations convinced them that this is still not a good idea for you, and you've already signed a treaty, or you haven't signed a treaty, and we're going to make you sign a treaty so that you don't let these private venture companies go out there, then let me out there and tell a story. I'll go tell a story. You can have everything. That's the worst case scenario. Just let me go out there, dive on the wrecks. Let me showcase what you've got in your waters, because if you wait for the government or academic organizations, see, here's the problem. Governments and academic organizations, if you let them do what they don't want us to do, they'll probably do 2 or 3 shipwrecks a year. When there are literally thousands just rotting away at the bottom of the ocean that they could take advantage of from private venture companies. That's why I'm trying to bridge that gap that seems impossible to bridge. But if not, let us go out there and showcase it and tell a story. Do a television show about it. There's nothing wrong with that business model. You lose nothing. You let us tell your story. You keep your artifacts. We give you the locations. Next, we go and showcase another rich historical find in another country, because I'm telling you, in another 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, it's all going to be gone, all rotted away. Nobody will ever do anything about it, and you can't rely on governments to do anything. Not that they're bad. It's just it's not interested. They don't have the finances for it. It's governments, and anything that's government run is like, you know how it works or how it doesn't work. There's too much red tape. There's too much politics. It can't be run like private companies. And
I know people that have ran into archaeologists, who I know a guy who was flat out told, we don't have the funding to go do a dig. This guy he was actually contacted by a historical society, and they wanted him to metal detect a site that was getting ready to be, where I believe it was the earliest mill in the county was, and they wanted him to metal detect it because a parking lot was getting put in, and an archaeologist found out about it and stuff, and they didn't have the funds to do any kind of dig, but they also didn't want him to do it. They would have rather it get lost completely to history, the artifacts lost, than to allow him to metal detect and to hand him over to be put into the local museum. So, yeah, I've heard of a lot of stories like that, and it just doesn't make sense. Why are they so hell-bent on, working with people like us? I mean, of course, we do land. I've never been doing what you do, but, for what you guys could bring to the local economy, they can't spare somebody to be on your boat with you at all times to make sure you don't run off with the treasure. I mean, I know you never would do that.
We've offered that. I mean, We've offered every avenue to bridge that gap, but they are so adamant about not working with private venture companies. They're adamant. And you don't know how many conversations I've had with people, not only told to me, but told to people in the business, what you just said. They would rather it go to just disintegrate at the bottom of the sea than to see us bring it up and gain financially. That's their biggest thing. They think that we're gaining financially. Well, you tell me the difference between a private venture company who pays for all the expenses with a permit that would eventually, if we're successful, that cost the host country nothing. But if we are successful and we're able to bring to the table a certain amount of commercially valuable artifacts that country gets to showcase, distribute, and eventually get and make a financial gain for themselves from this, what's the difference between that and having a government or academic organization do it and get federal grant money?
Right.
What is the difference? What they're getting, they're asking federal grant money to go and do an expedition of a particular type. They are looking for money so that they can promote their universities or whatever. It's no different than us. The only difference is that we're actually going to turn over part of the artifacts, a very large portion of the artifacts, to the host country, and they're going to benefit.
Yes.
The business model makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that they think that our business model doesn't make sense. And I've had people in government situations, people in charge of the archaeology for certain governments tell me, you're right. I know it. I'll tell you right. Yeah, your business model works, but I'm never going to be able to say, yes, I agree with you, because if I agree with you, I'm ousted. I'm on the blacklist.
Yes.
And that's what would happen to them. And they'll lose their cushy job. The university will oust them. These organizations will oust them. But let me just ask you this. If you've got a school that's promoting marine archaeology and their kids are studying their butts off, they're being indoctrinated to believe that private venture companies are bad. But when they graduate and they've got all these student loans to pay back and they go to work and they want to be a marine archaeologist, where's the jobs?
Right.
They don't have any, because the government organizations don't have any available for them. So there's a bunch of marine archaeologists or people who have marine archaeology degrees, doctorates, that I'm going to have to go get another job because there's no work for them to do. They're all doing desk jobs or doing scientific journals that nobody will ever read. Right. And that's the biggest thing that we have against that. One of my pet peeves is that these organizations, and even if they do, and they do a good job, I'm not saying that they do a bad job, but we can do just as good a job or better than they, in my opinion.
Yes.
If we work together, we can get that information out there in the public arena and everybody can enjoy it. But if you leave it to a university, the only people that are enjoying it are the scientists in a meeting talking about this new wreck that they found, writes a good write-up in a scientific journal that gets buried in the back of the library that nobody reads.
Right.
It's
horrible. I think another really good point, and I don't know, I don't do what you do, but I bet you do. How many shipwrecks are found? How many shipwrecks are found by the academia versus people like you? I bet it is such a minute number of what they found compared to what like somebody like you has found, and brought it
Absolutely.
to somebody's attention to begin with, and then they just want to leave it sit and rot away. It just doesn't make sense, and I sure hope you can bridge that gap.
In 2 years of filming Cooper's Treasure, we found over 100 shipwrecks. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all treasure-laden,
right.
But we've documented at least 100 shipwreck sites. That were, I would say 90% of them were unknown to the academic community. Why not throw us kudos for doing that?
Right.
And work with us, because here's the other thing. If I lost my train of thought, but what you're saying is true, that a lot, here's what I was going to say. And again, a lot of these guys that raise their own money and they're passionate like I am about finding shipwrecks. A lot of these shipwreck companies have went out and got permits to locate shipwrecks. They get a permit to do surveys. They do all the work. They've located these anomalies. They've proven the case that this is salvage worthy. They submit reports to the government as per their regulations, and then they're stopped at that point. The government takes these, and I'm not going to point fingers at which governments, but governments will take this information. They'll divvy out that information to certain universities and say, okay, here, we've got a shipwreck for you. This guy's done all the work and the surveys, and here's the data collected, and go after it. So when you talk about how many have the universities or academic organizations done, they've done some. I don't know the number to that, but I can guarantee you a lot of the work that they have done was previously done by a private venture treasure hunting group, and given to them for free.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be a slap in the face to you guys.
It's really hard, and I don't want it to sound like I'm out there badgering the academic organization. I'm trying to wake them up and let them know that there's got to be a way to work together. Otherwise, this industry's going away. And, I don't know. I want to continue to tell my stories, my problem, and there's so many stories to be told. I know locations to thousands of shipwrecks based on some of the information and files that not only that Gordon gave me, but information that my team have accumulated in the research that we've done let us go out there and do this. It could only benefit the benefits that I've already mentioned. And I'm running off on this huge tangent about this, and I didn't want to get on the radio or podcast and get angry, but I'm really passionate about this, and I really want us to be able to go on.
No, I completely understand.
I really feel your passion in what you're saying, and you know, it kind of it reminds me of like when I go places and there's a prime spot that could be metal detected, but some corporate conglomeration owns the property, and then there's no way to get on it, and then next thing you know, they're building a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Walmart or a parking lot, and everything's completely lost at that point. It's just it's a shame, and no, I feel your frustrations with dealing with some of the troubles and hiccups in being able to treasure hunt shipwrecks and stuff like that. But I was curious, how long, when you guys get out on a site, from your, well, not necessarily from your initial, once you discover a site and you find a site, how long does it take you generally? I mean, obviously there's bigger and smaller shipwrecks, so it can really vary, I'm sure. But how long does it take you guys to go through and really process and recover and, work the site properly and document everything from that site?
Well, it varies because each shipwreck is different. No two shipwreck locations are the same because it doesn't matter how they're broken apart. Some shipwrecks are fractured and the shipwrecks spread over miles. There's a shipwreck in Central America, the San Jose, that spread 1631 San Jose, that spread over 42 miles. The debris field. Wow. So in order to really recover all of the artifacts would take years to complete that process. Now, if you've got a shipwreck that hit a very shallow reef and sunk right on top of that reef, depending on the weather conditions, if the waves are pounding it, it's going to take you longer because you're going to be pounded by the waves. But if it managed to clear that reef after the bottom came out and then it just sank on the other side of that reef, and then you've got an entire ballast pile concentrated in one area, that type of wreck site's going to be a lot easier. And it all depends on the documentation and the type of equipment. Again, this goes back to regulations in whomever you're working with, whatever host country. Will they allow you to use dredges? Will they allow you to use blowers? What type of equipment are you allowed to use? How fast will you be able to recover this stuff? You have to set up an on-site lab. A temporary lab on the boat, then you got to have an on-site lab that you can transfer the artifacts to, so that the proper documentation and photography of these artifacts, and each one has to be itemized, and then so that it could take 6 months on average. An average wreck site, if I was to go out and find one that was concentrated to one area, 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, depending on the depth, depending on the conditions, depending on the amount of artifacts found. You're not going to pick up every ballast stone and bring it back to the lab. They're just river rocks. So you leave a lot of that stuff in situ. But what I'm talking about, in situ preservation, of leaving everything there, that's ridiculous. That'll never work. But we would like to bring some of the rich cultural history back to museums and labs for preservation and conservation, put into a museum. You don't have to take everything. You can leave part of it in the ocean, in situ, and then bring back whatever's valuable or whatever tells the story complete, because you can't just bring up part of the shipwreck, because a lot of the stuff depends on ship identification. Where is its origin from? Is it Spanish? What period? Is it English? And so it varies. It could, some shipwrecks, look at Mel Fisher and the Fisher family. These guys have been working for decades, and they're still finding shipwreck material from that fleet. The 1715 fleet guys out there off the Treasure Coast, they're finding shipwreck material and treasure associated with those shipwrecks from that fleet. There's still a couple of ships that haven't been located. Nobody knows if they've gone further north or further south, and there's a bunch of guys out there working their butts off every season trying to find the rest of that story. So some of these things could take decades. Some could take 6 months, some could take a year, but on the average, if you find one and it's concentrated, 6 months to a year and a half. But they all vary. They all vary. That's not 100.
Do you have the permits you get for searching some of these areas and sites? Do they have conditions on them at all, if for time limits for how long you're allowed to conduct your searches?
Usually you get a 12-month lease, sometimes in some cases a 24-month lease, and they're renewable, but you have to have a reason. You have to say, if you're in the middle of the entire excavation process and you've got a lab set up and you go, hey, look, we need another year to finish the project, they'll probably grant you another year. As long as you're following their guidelines and the rules and restrictions that were outlined in your lease, you're fine. The moment you deviate from that gives them reason not to renew it. So each one is totally different. Every single one is different. But if you make the rules and the regulations so impossible, which a lot of these countries are doing, it would cost us more money than we could possibly make or bring to the table, and it's basically defeating the entire purpose of setting up a business relationship. So we're hoping to, again, bridge that gap, make it sensible, make contracts sensible, make the divisions sensible, so that everybody benefits.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question, Darryl. You said in the last 2 seasons of the show, in the past 2 seasons, you found probably 100 shipwrecks. Of course, not all salvageable, and I'm sure finding 100 in that time, you didn't spend a ton of time, but just in your guesstimate, how many of those ships do you think would be worth salvaging for you?
Well, look, if you're going to talk historical value and commercial value, probably, historically speaking, if you want to tell a story, they're all worth salvaging.
Yes.
The problem is it financially, is it sustainable financially? In some cases, just documenting a particular shipwreck site and then saying, hey, look, we don't believe this to be anything of real commercial value, but here's the information, here's the photographs, and here's the data that we've collected. Feasibly speaking, financially, we're not able to do this one for you, but here it is for your records if you guys want to bring that's where we would invite them to go, hey, you know what? Start training some marine archaeologists in your universities, bring them out there to a site, and make it a project for them. Mm-hmm. And then I would, maybe 1 to 2% of the shipwrecks that we found, maybe sometimes 5% would have some sort of commercial value. Every single shipwreck has a value. So
it
depends on what your definition of value is.
No, I'm talking about for you to salvage it, which obviously means there's money to be made to pay for your expenses. I mean, how many of those out of the 100 do you think would you be interested in salvaging?
I would say a good 5%. That I believe would be commercially valuable. I think 99% of them are valuable historically speaking. They all tell their own story. There are some more historically significant because they're either the initial the groups that came to those areas, and those ships have more historical value because they tell a bigger story about that country's past. And in those cases, I would say 50% of every shipwreck that we came across is probably worth going back to. Again, not necessarily for the commercial value, but for the historical value.
Right. That's great. That is great.
I got a question, Mike, that I want to know, and what's the coolest and by coolest or most interesting thing you've ever recovered? I don't mean value wise by any means, because as a metal detectorist myself, I may be more excited about I was pretty stoked about a cigar token I found the other day, which really has no value other than it's really cool, and I've never seen it before. So to me, like, what I find most intriguing is not necessarily monetary value-wise, but a lot of times more just fascinating for different things that I find. But what do you think the coolest thing that you've ever recovered and found was?
I was in Mexico back in 1999, and I found my lovely lady, my wife. that's
brownie
my
points.
Yeah. No, one of the things, it probably, I get asked that a lot. Probably one of my favorite things that I've ever found. I found a gold coin on a beach with my father, and to do that right next to him, I found it with him right next to me. That was pretty amazing. But my favorite piece of all was when Gordon and I were in Mexico, and we went outside the international or the Mexican territorial waters, and we dove on what appeared to be a shipwreck, and it was of Spanish origin. And on there I found a Mayan pendant that they must have stolen from the Mayans, and it was still fully intact, and it's a beautiful piece. I still have it, and it's my favorite because it reminds me of my special time when I was with Gordon, and who was one of my favorite people of all time, and one of my favorite places, Mexico, or near Mexico anyway. And it was a Spanish shipwreck, and I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever found on a shipwreck. Because most of that stuff that they stole from the Mayans or Aztecs was either melted down or destroyed. And I have never come across another one. And I don't know too many people that have come across Mayan artifacts on Spanish shipwrecks.
Yeah, it's cool. You know, anytime I've seen or heard of any of this, diving on shipwrecks, and although you think it's so cool what you guys find, but I've always thought it's a shame it was all melted down. Wouldn't it be cool to see what the Aztecs and Mayans and what kind of gold they had that was stolen? So to have that is just amazing, because I've never heard of it. I mean,
yeah, because the piece is about 800 to 1,200 years old. So it was centuries old, and I guess whoever they stole it from must have been a high-ranking official in the Mayan civilization who had kept this because it's a sand-casted piece, and it's absolutely stunning. And part of it got eaten away from the being in the salt water for so many hundreds of years when the Spanish wrecked. But it's like it's telling two stories: one of the Mayan civilization and one of the Spanish who stole it from the Mayans. And I thought it was just the coolest piece I've ever seen.
What's it like to have all these sites that you want to dive on and you want to do a recovery, and you're just waiting and fighting governments and stuff? I would have to think that is just a horrible feeling. I mean, until talking to you, most of what I know is what I've learned from TV. And to me, you would think I was always under the suspicion that the hard part is finding a wreck. It sounds like the hard part is dealing with the government, or at least for you, that's the hard part.
That's the hardest part. That's what I try to tell everybody. And it's very frustrating because the excitement, I still get excited when I find a ballast stone. I still get excited when I find a ship's pin, bronze or iron. All of it excites me because I know that I'm onto something, and it's just that feeling. A lot of us feel the same way. I mean, we're the first people to touch that since that was lost at sea, and it kind of raises the hair on the back of your neck. It's just there's nothing like it. Knowing that you're that much closer to being able to put together the pieces of the puzzle and tell a story that hasn't been told. And to me, it's the biggest shame is not being able to continue on to do this, because we just can't see eye to eye, and to know that the chances of us actually being able to continue this on for decades to come is probably not likely. And I'm just being honest with you. I don't see this as a business that's sustainable under these types of rules and regulations, because there's just no way to maintain a business. It's a business, much like that it is for the universities. It's a business for them. It's grant money. It's proving to the university it's a worthwhile wreck to undergo an investigation and excavation. It's no different for us, but it's unsustainable if there's no financial gain for us. And it's very frustrating. It's super frustrating, because the only way I'm going to ever be able to do this, if it does shut down, if the industry does shut down, is to tell the stories and do television shows about it. And if that's the case, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather tell the story than it just...
What a sad thing.
It is sad.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, it's... I'll say it. I'm not a big fan of the archaeology community overall. I think there's some good people in it. I would like to see some different, it's a shame over in England. You and I discussed, I do the UK show every Thursday. The archaeologists over there are much easier, much better to deal with. In most cases, they support the detectorist, and everybody turns their stuff in. It doesn't seem to be such a problem. I mean, I don't care what you do. There's going to be some bad apples. It's going to happen. But the history that's being saved and recorded and properly taken care over there is just phenomenal. And in most cases, the archaeologists support the detectorists. And I think they've come to understand they don't get all the grant money, and they don't, they can't do what a detectorist can do. They can go out and look at a site and try to, but detectorists are what's driving everything over there in England, not the archaeologists.
Yeah.
I mean, the archaeologists come in on these finds. We had a guy on, Mike Smith. He's the guy who found that chariot. I don't know if you've heard about that chariot over in England that was found I believe this past fall. And
I have. I've seen it.
Yeah, we had Mike on, and it's an incredible thing. The archaeologists would have never stumbled upon that, and he did the right thing, like 99% of them do, and he turned it in, and they didn't believe him at first, and then come back and they did a dig and they found more, and they're coming back. That'll probably be getting dug on for several years, and all due to a detectorist, and it's a shame. Everything you're telling me makes 100%, is just 100% right on. And there's nothing I disagree with. And I agree with you 100%. But why are these people, why are they fighting you on this? I mean, do they really want it to sit at the bottom of the ocean and rot? Because that makes no sense.
Well, they'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you that. Look, you can always, and I use this analogy a lot. Did prohibition work? No, all you did was get a bunch of bootleggers in the black market. It's not going to work. You're going to get a bunch of weekend warriors going up there and ripping up the sites because there is no other option for them, and those are the bad apples. Mm-hmm. Because they put so many strict guidelines to follow, they make it impossible for this to function as a normal business. Whereas if they loosened up the guidelines and work together with these people, because without passion behind what you do, the whole vision is lost. If you're just going to do this for a specific community, so if you leave this up to the academic community so that they can teach this information to students only, and I haven't really seen a lot of good information being told, and granted, not all of it. I'm not saying that they're not talented people. There's a lot of talented people in the academic community that could benefit. And this relationship, if they built a relationship with these private venture companies, if they built a relationship, that the amount of grant money would even be tenfold what they're getting, just because there's other people out there assisting them with these finds and there's a lot of shipwreck locations that a lot of treasure hunters know the whereabouts of, but they're afraid to give up these locations.
Yes.
Especially even applying for a permit, knowing that if they apply for a permit and you have to go through this survey process and turn over all the data and information on a particular wreck site, and then they go, sorry, bud, thank you for the information. We're cutting you off right here, knowing that these guys are going to probably take that information, and if the grant money is raised for that particular academic organization, they'll go out there and take it from them.
Yeah,
they literally just take it.
Right, you did all the work
all the time.
Mm-hmm. You spent your money and your time so somebody else can come in and take it, and it's wrong. Yeah, that's. I want to.
And how much easier would it be to work together? Then that way go, hey, you know what? Bring your marine archaeologists, the students. Let's work together. Let me show you how we find these shipwrecks. Let me show you the methodology, and let's incorporate a business model that we both work together on.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things, I heard archaeologist Jim Sinclair that works with me on Cooper's Treasure came up with a fantastic idea. He said, look, if you guys want to know where the treasure goes, because they think that if you sell it to these private collectors, then there's no way of us keeping track of where the treasure is. Well, I can tell you're never going to keep track of it leaving it on the bottom of the ocean. That's the first one.
Yes.
Secondly, why not register each piece of treasure as it trades hands the way you do registration of a car? Mm-hmm. And you know where it goes to when it trades hands. They have to pay a registration fee, a minimum fee of $12, let's say. New owner takes the registration. They are now the new owner of that piece, and there's a register register of where all these treasures have ended up. And if you can keep track of all these cars in the world by a database that records all the registrations of automobiles that are in this planet, why couldn't you do that with treasure? Mm-hmm. How about that? That's a simple solution.
Brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. I want to share a quick story with you, just because I think you'd be interested. There's a guy out of Ohio named Greg Shipley, and he's an amateur archaeologist, metal detectorist. And when I say amateur, he's top notch. And for example, he metal detects and does digs on sites where Matt Anthony Wayne, the Indian Wars, the Ohio Indian Wars of the 1790s. Let's just go with that. And in my years, all my years of detecting and being in different groups and social media and talking to people, I've seen, I believe now, 3 what they call frog leg buttons. It's an eagle button that was military at that time, the late 1790s. The whole U.S. military was in Ohio at the time. That's how big this was. I've seen, I think, 3 or 4 now that have been found by somebody besides Greg. Greg has found over, I believe, 170 the last time I talked to him. But the archaeologists hate him, even though his stuff goes into museums and historical societies and everything else. They hate him, and they've been after him. They watch him so close, and it's so sad to see because he's done more single-handedly. He's done more for the archaeological community in Ohio than anybody else, without a doubt in my mind. And to give you a quick thing that we had discussed, he told when we had him on the show, he'd brought up that there was a grant to do a dig on where they thought particular site related to Matt Anthony Wayne during these Indian Wars. It was like a $70,000 grant. They dug for 3 or 4 days. They found 3 or 4 artifacts and were done. And my question is, well, where did the money go? My God, $70,000? And, there's so little to be shown from like Ohio State, the archaeological society and stuff, but somebody like Greg has put so much out there. There's been so much knowledge gained from what he does and what the digs he's done, and they just don't care. He was actually raided, I want to say the 90s, and they took a bunch of his stuff, a lot of his Indian stuff. Well, his Indian artifacts, Native American artifacts. And he fought without an attorney. And not only did he get all of his artifacts back, he got an undisclosed settlement. So there's hope. People like that, people like you with the passion and, the drive and to do this, hopefully something can get done. But I am not overall a big fan of the archaeological community because of stories like that. We've heard other stories like that. What you're telling us now.
It's not that they're bad people, that their ideas and their strengths in the industry are bad. They probably know how to go ahead and excavate a shipwreck and document it and curate these things. But the problem is they're so close-minded when it comes to a business model that makes sense. If you've got Dr. Eugene Lyons, you've got my dear friend James Sinclair, a marine archaeologist. Between those two people, the amount of shipwreck material that they've located, the archival data that they've done research on, and the experience that they've garnered, having been in this industry for so long, they should be praising these people for what they're doing and how they're adding to the amount of information that's actually made it to the public arena because of what they do. And they're passionate about it. And neither one of those guys is making millions of dollars every year by getting shares of treasure and selling it off to collectors. These guys are doing it because they're passionate about it. They love it. And this goes along with a lot of these treasure hunters that are out there on the Treasure Coast and the Fisher family. These people do it because they're passionate about it, not because they're out there trying to screw the system. The system is not helping them.
Yeah,
and
the system's screwing them.
The system is screwing the system. Mm-hmm. There's no method behind the madness. There has to be some sort of understanding that if we continue on this way, we're killing an industry, and all these poor students that are studying marine biology are going to be out of work the moment they graduate.
It's a shame.
No job.
These universities, they, of course, they just don't make sense on some of this. But, what a great idea instead of fighting you on it. And, they have to know what you've discovered and what you've actually opened up for them to go dive on and look. Why don't they get in it and, hey, we want a piece of this, and we will provide people that help you to work on it. The people that are getting an education. Why don't they go that route? Why hasn't that come up? Because I would bet for you to take a little less of the off the top to have that knowledge and that help, and people that I think you'd probably be crazy not to want that.
It doesn't make sense to me because there's such a wealth of knowledge out there from the guys that are actually in the field working their butts off right now that they could be working with that would only aid them in whatever projects they're trying to teach to these students that want to be marine archaeologists and open up a whole new world of discovery and storytelling. And none of it makes any sense. I can tell you this much. In secret, in private conversations with archaeologists in the academic community, people who work for government organizations, people in politics that have to follow these rules because they've signed certain treaties and not signed certain treaties. I've had every single one of them in private tell me, I would love to go and hang out with you for a day and watch you guys do what you do and be there when you're making these discoveries. But in public, I can't say that, and I will never say that, and I have to keep it quiet. And I'm very unfortunate, but it's true. They can't, because they too will be ousted and put on a blacklist. You try to get Eugene Lyons and Jim Sinclair in front of an academic podium to talk about marine archaeology, and they're not welcome. And it's unfortunate because they're taking these people with vast knowledge of this industry and shunning them because they don't want to they've chosen to work with private venture companies. And I think that's all I'm going to talk about this. I think I made my point.
Yeah, that's just
my point of view.
sad and tragic. Absolutely sad and tragic.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and I think we've covered. Is there anything else we need to cover before we open up questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question. I'm curious. The next season that comes out for the show, are you able to give us any heads up on anything that we might see on that, or any look into something we might see?
Well, Discovery Channel, and I can't go into details, but Discovery Channel has decided to pass on doing a season 3 of Cooper's Treasure. There's a lot of doors that have opened up for me having done the first 2 seasons. I'm going to pursue this with every ounce of energy that I can to be able to continue to tell my story, whether it be broadcast, television, or streaming. And I will get something done. I'm working on it every day. And when that comes along, I'll make an announcement. Again, people can follow me on my Twitter, Darrell Miklos, and my Instagram. There is a Cooper's Treasure fan a Facebook page that people can follow. If I'm going to make announcements, I'm actually working with a gentleman out of St. Augustine, Florida, who owns Spanish Main Antiques, and together we're showcasing the rich history of treasures that have been found. His name is Mark Anthony, and we're working together on trying to educate people of the value and the love and the passion in this business. I'm doing a shameless plug here. And I want to spread the word, and I am going to continue to tell the story, probably on a different network or a different model, but there's a future here, and there are a lot of doors that have opened up since this, and I'm going to continue to tell the story one way or another, and showcase what it is that we do, no matter what.
That's fantastic.
Unfortunately, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said I enjoyed shooting Cooper's Treasure on Discovery Channel. It was probably a game changer for me and the industry as a whole. And I think it brought public awareness to what it is that we're passionate about and what we do. And I think it's done nothing but better the public opinion about treasure hunters, I'm hoping, and erase some of the stigma attached to the phrase treasure hunter, because there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to call ourselves historical shipwreck recovery specialists because of the stigma attached to the phrase treasure hunting. But we are treasure hunters, and we're going to continue to tell the story. We're going to continue to share what we do, and I'm not done. I can tell you I'm not done. There's a whole list of things that I've got planned in the very near future. If you just follow me on social media, I can guarantee you'll be informed as to when and where it'll come about.
Again, real quick, what's the name of the group? Your Facebook group?
Which group?
Facebook.
It's Cooper's Treasure. Cooper's Treasure, there's a Facebook group of following that follow us, and we post on there events. I do speaking engagements. I do seminars. I do all sorts of personal appearances at Spanish Main Antiques in St. Augustine. I'm going to set up where I do regular appearances there, talk treasure, and it's going to be fantastic. And God, I wish I could get into more details of what our plans are in the future. But if you follow me, I guarantee you, you'll be well informed as to where we're going to be and what it is that we're doing. And hopefully we'll be able to work in the Turks and Caicos with Gemini Marine Exploration, my company that we've set up to undergo expeditions in Turks and Caicos. Let's see what happens.
Great. That is awesome. One other question, and then we're going to open up questions. And I hope this is okay to ask. Actually, this is from Mike Fuson. New shop. He said something about ask you about a shop.
A shop. It's Spanish Main Antiques. It's in St. Augustine. This is a treasure shop out there. It's 3,200 square foot. It's filled with fabulous antiques and treasures from the colonial period, English, Spanish, you name it. That's where I partnered up with a gentleman named Mark Anthony, and we're talking treasure with a bunch of people. I'll be doing monthly appearances there and showcasing the treasure and artifacts that we've come up with, and with like-minded people who are equally as passionate about it as we are. And we welcome academics to come visit. We welcome marine archaeologists to come, no matter if you're from the academic community. Just come and share the excitement of historical colonial period shipwreck treasures and artifacts, and the beauty behind it and the stories.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. We're going to go ahead and we've had a lot of questions throughout the show. We're going to have them, we're going to go ahead and open that up. The first question is from me, and I'm just curious, have you ever thought about having a fat guy with a very majestic beard who I've never seen the ocean though, and I've never dived. Would you ever be looking for somebody like that? I mean, is there a place on my and your needs for somebody like that? Remember, my beard
Absolutely.
is beautiful beard.
Absolutely.
I'm hard working. I mean, I'll sweep.
I'm like a blind man. It doesn't. I don't see race, color, religion, politics. It is. If you're there and you're passionate about it, come share. We're actually talking about at our shop taking people out on certain locations to actually dive on shipwrecks and see it with their own eyes. Not that they can take any of the material, but we're organizing that now. And
I wouldn't
that's
dive. I'm scared of sharks.
Well,
and
you
stuff.
could go the where
I could clean.
I could take you to sites where you could look through the clear water and go, oh, I see the anchor. I see a cannon.
That would be
I'd
really
love to
cool.
take people out there.
That
dive
would be
with us
really cool.
Come with us.
So are you guys doing that now?
Yeah, we're organizing that now. Yeah, that's something that we're going to be doing.
Oh, that is great. That's absolutely fantastic. So let's see if we got any questions.
And my email, if I can put out a public email. It's Darryl at DarrellMiklosTreasures.com. That's my email for anybody who has any questions. That's Darrell, DarrEll at DarrellMiklosTreasures with S.com.
And it's let me make sure I got it right. It's Miklos, correct?
Miklos for Miklos.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. So we're opening up. We've had a million questions throughout the show. Now they're not. Nobody's asking questions. I kept telling them, wait till the end. Let me scroll up and see if I can get some of these questions.
And it seems like there's no end to it, huh? Poor people. Let's take some questions. I'd love to answer some.
What material was the pendant made from, the Incan pendant?
It was brass. Brass or a type of bronze. It was cuprous material, and it was sand cast. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. Stunning. And it's about 2.5 inches long, about 1.5 inches wide, and weighs about 3/4 of an ounce, maybe an ounce.
What's the rules in international water?
They vary. So don't quote me on this, but you can apply for admiralty leases in international waters. Now, what a lot of countries have done, there used to be a 3-mile limit off the coast of Florida, and I think in some cases they've extended that out, but then they have this economic zone. Each country has an economic zone. They can claim that as part of their waters, but if you get that fine line where you're in the international water line where it doesn't interfere with anybody's economic zone, you can, if you're out hunting and you find a shipwreck, you can file an admiralty claim on it and put an arrest and rim on it and file a 30-day. You have to publish 30 days in a periodical, and if nobody claims what it is that you found, then you become the custodian of that shipwreck, and then you can start. But it's a process. Again, it sounds easy just to say it in a few words, but it's a lot of red tape.
I'm sure.
The permit process, even admiralty permits, and That's why a lot of the treasure hunters on the Treasure Coast, they piggyback on a particular leaseholder's lease, and they subcontract through the leaseholder to undergo expeditions on a particular area.
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
So there's a far and few between leases actually being issued in the state of Florida. I'm not sure about other states. Again, they vary. You have to do some homework and you can figure out. But if you're in international waters, it would be an admiralty lease, and any other type of lease you apply for, you have to understand where you are and apply for it, whatever territorial waters of a particular state or country.
I gotcha. Got a question from Mike. How did you meet James Sinclair?
I met James Sinclair, funny enough, I met him through a mutual friend of ours who was, I was involved in a project where I was helping fund a salvage group, and he was the archaeologist on that salvage group, and I met him through that salvage company, and what a treasure. There's another treasure I found out of nowhere. James Sinclair, there's nobody better in the business as far as I'm concerned to work with. He's fabulous. So it was through mutual friends in the business.
Very interesting. Do we have any more questions? Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, one thing I was curious, and maybe you mentioned this, maybe you did not. Is your dad still with us?
No, he passed away last year when we were shooting the show, and
I'm sorry
in
to hear
season
that.
2, yeah, no worries. In season 2, episode 4, there's a lot of that was talked about in that episode,
Okay.
and it happened while we were filming. I actually got the call while we were filming, and it just happened to be my 55th birthday that he passed away on.
Wow.
Which was ironic because he never remembered my birthday. So
that is crazy.
But yeah,
Absolutely
it is. It was a sad ending to a relationship that was just kind of turbulent between us, and I wish I could have ended it differently, but it wasn't by my choice. It was by his, how it ended. And
yeah.
I'm an easy guy to work with normally.
Yeah, I knew that, Matt. I thought you knew that. I thought you'd seen them all.
I've seen most of it, and I was pretty sure that I already knew the answer, but I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't mistaken.
We've got a few more questions, and I actually, I think this one's really good. What is the deepest dive you've done, Darryl, and diving on a wreck, and was there any special mixes needed?
Well, I, for one, I will admit I am not a deep water diver. I don't relish the fact of going too deep just because there's danger involved, and I have a wife and 2 kids. But on season 1, I did, Mike Perna dropped a marker on an anomaly reading that we got, and it landed on a ledge at about 80, 90 feet. And I couldn't, usually we're pretty good at finding, especially if you're working in an area where there's hard bottom, the artifact associated with that anomaly. And Mike is almost always 99% on when he drops a marker. It's right in and around within at least 6 feet of that particular artifact. Well, I couldn't find it, and it was on a ledge. And I said, Mike, are you sure it's here? And he goes, yes, it's right there. It's about 80. I forgot, it was either 80 or 90 feet deep. And then the wall, the contour went down to 90 feet. That's where the ledge ended. And then it went down to a wall. And I said, I'm going to find this thing. And before I knew it, it was at 210 feet. And I went, oh, wait a second. My voice was changing because we were able to talk with the camera people as well as Mike up above. We had a communication, a full face mask where we could talk. And my voice sounded like I was on helium. Then I realized, you know what? I'm an idiot. I was so caught up in the moment.
Wow.
Before I knew it, was down 210 feet on a single tank of air. And I went, oh my God, I need to go back up. And as I went up, I think the last 10 feet I ran out of air, but nothing happened to me. I would never suggest anybody ever do that. Always be aware of your surroundings, your depth. Even me, a seasoned diver, I got caught up in the moment. It was an unplanned dive, and I got my butt kicked from the producers for having done that without telling them I was going to do it, because we're shallow water recovery specialists, and most of the shipwrecks that we find, in fact, 95% of most shipwrecks that have been salvaged were done, probably more than 95%, were done in shallow waters, just because most shipwrecks took place in shallow water areas, ran across shallow reefs, and so most of the wrecks we deal in are about 25 feet of water, 30 feet of water.
Wow. Yeah. What's Mike asked, what's the cost of an expedition per day to hunt? And I'm guessing that depends on there's a lot of factors with that, depending on what all is required. But can you give us an idea?
That's with a competent crew of 4, a boat doing a survey, 40 to 50,000 a month. And now there's a lot of guys doing this a lot cheaper, where you go out on a little boat, a boat that you own. You don't have to have a lease, or you're not renting it. You've got your own equipment, and it's just pay for gas. Mm-hmm. But so it all depends on what level you're working at. Now, if you're out in the Caribbean and you're working with a host country, you're going to throw more money at it because you're way the hell out there. You don't work 9 to 5 and then come back in for the day and then go back out 9 to 5 like the guys on the Treasure Coast. You're beholden to having to stay in a country. So when you're outside of your home territory, like the guys on the Treasure Coast, it's a lot less expensive for those guys. Whereas if you're in an international Caribbean developing country, it's going to be a lot more expensive. It could be up to 40, 50 grand a month just for the survey, and then even more than that when you're doing the undergoing excavations. And the most expensive part of that is preservation and conservation, because the lab work gets expensive, and you got to hire a bunch of people to, go over each piece, photograph it, and all that. So you could run into a couple $1 million in a year or two easily.
Wow.
Easily.
Yeah,
that's just average. Now, that's ballpark. It varies. Each situation is different. Like I said, I know guys that are going out there for a full season with 40 grand. They can work all summer long, but that's because they come in and out every day, and they just pay for fuel. And these guys are just out there because they're passionate about it, and they'll beg, borrow, or steal to get the money to go out there and work a season and hopefully find the big one.
Yeah. Have other than that dive that sounds like it turned pretty dangerous, and of course with the government issues that sounded pretty scary. And I'm curious, it almost sounded like you kind of feared for your life when you were with your dad in Caicos. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Turks and Caicos.
And Caicos. Or go ahead.
No, back in the 70s, it was a different animal. There were, and especially working with somebody like my father, who just didn't want to follow a whole lot of rules and regulations, because the rules and regulations were really lax then. Not that he didn't want to follow them, but, he didn't care if he threw me overboard and said, get in the water. I don't care if it's down 60, 100 feet. You're going down there. And he didn't teach me that, you had to watch your time and your pressure and how much air you had. And, I just dove in, never paid attention, wasn't trained because he wasn't a good teacher. Mm-hmm. And so those things were really dangerous. And we got caught in a storm one time where we had a barbecue at night around 9:00. We all went to bed, and at midnight the boat was shaking, wind was blowing 90 miles and 110 mile an hour gusts. Stuff was flying off the deck, and we had a boat that we were towing behind us, a dive boat, a camera boat, and it was sinking, and it was brand new. The captain of the ship jumped off the boat in his underwear, took the boat all the way to shore in the darkness. We couldn't see him. We lost him. We thought he sunk and died at sea. I begged him not to go do it. He goes, we just got this thing. We can't lose it. I said, don't do it, Timmy. You're going to die. And he did it anyway. He ended up making it to shore. But for up until daylight, I had no idea what had happened to him. So I called my mom at 3 a.m, said, I can't reach my wife. And my first daughter, who's now 17, had just been born. And I said, Mom, you got to call Yachty. I can't reach her. And I said, I'm in a tropical storm. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know what's going to happen. We just lost our captain, and the boat is sinking. And then we only had sat phones then. There was no cell phone service back then.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any communications for 3 days. My mom thought I died, and she hated me forever for doing it. She didn't hate me, but she was so mad at me for so many years, leaving her in the dark for 3 days thinking I was dead.
Right.
So,
wow.
And, you know, I've been in several hurricanes, took on water one time over the bow, went into the air vent, went down to the galley, shorted the stove out, caught a fire in a galley, and we had one storm, a cyclone. These were two cyclones. They weren't hurricanes. They were cyclones, one approaching us from the starboard and one approaching us from the port side. And the ship was going in two opposite directions, water over the bow, fire in the galley. And I thought we were gone. And you don't want to be on fire in the middle of a storm.
Right.
And we were in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle too. There was nobody around. That was scary as heck. And I've been in a lot of really bad situations, and I am lucky to be alive. That's why I don't take my chances and do deep water diving. I'll let the other really tough dudes go do that, and I'll stick to shallow water dives. You know, anything under 100 feet I'm okay with, but deep water stuff, I'll take a sub.
Yeah, wow, that is incredible. I just can't imagine. Yeah, never mind. I don't want to come hunt with you. Never mind.
Oh, come on. It's fun.
I'm still in. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I don't think Steph will let me go. I just don't think she'd let me. But you know, I'm a chicken. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's scary. I don't know. I've never even seen the ocean. I never have. Which is sad and tragic. So it's already scary to me anyhow. You know.
Well, the ocean is made of liquid, so if you touch it, your fingers get wet. It's like water. I'm teasing.
Just a little different.
You got to come out sometime. It's totally different than staying in the dirt. But nothing wrong with looking for its treasure in dirt.
Right. No, I've always been fascinated with it. And your show, like I said, Mike turned me onto your show, and I was just blown away. I like I told you, it's so hard for me to find time with the kids and everything to have that time to really be able to focus. And I was losing sleep watching the show because I would stay up late after the kids went to bed and stuff to watch it. And I was just amazed and loved your outlook on everything and how you handled it and everything else. And it's just a wonderful show. And I have no doubt it'll keep going for you. Something really great's going to come along.
Pop. I got something brewing. Don't worry about it.
Good.
I got something brewing.
Good to hear. Well, guys, I think let's call it a night. My voice has had enough. I've absolutely, Darryl, it's been a wonderful time having you on. We will keep in touch.
Thank you, guys.
We would love to have you back. And then, I talked to you about the UK thing, and I'd love to get you on that too. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, and everybody, if they do want to catch up on the show, those who are listening who haven't seen the show, you can Google it, Cooper's Treasure. You can watch it on YouTube. It's on Amazon Prime, I think, still. But yeah, if you just want to watch clips, there's ways to do that. So,
yeah,
it's worth watching, and you can see who's passionate about it. And look, there's nobody more passionate about this than me and Gordon and my crew and everybody that I work with. There's a whole list of guys that are in this business that are really passionate about it, and I hope it doesn't go away. So watch it if you get
me neither. Darryl, I love the show. I love your personality too, and you can see the passion. Like that's what I mean. It was kind of, I felt like it was a little just raw and natural, and it really brings out who you are, I think, and I love it. I would tell anybody to watch it, and we'll keep doing that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it, and all my best to everybody, and thanks to all the fans. The fans are awesome, and I get so much positive feedback. I've got more to tell, so stay tuned.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was actually our pleasure for sure.
All right, take care, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine acts as a hub for information, offering articles from archaeologists, detectorists and other specialists throughout the genre, featuring many links, event info and news articles associated to archaeology and metal detecting. We also offer professional review services and promotion for books, resources, videos, documentaries, gadgets, equipment and much more. The magazine is run by the archaeological and metal detecting community for the archaeological and metal detecting community. So come visit us at archmdmag.com, that's archmdmag.com, and check out information from our media section with all the latest content, news from the Archaeology channel, podcast and the YouTube channels that feature the now legendary Digger Dawn, the Man with the Hat and Archeo Duck, just to name a few. If you would like to offer an article, link or inquire about other services, then pay us a visit at archmdmag.com and drop us a line.